So the final game of a sorry season threw up a few surprises. 4-4 the final score on the final day of the season at St Mary's. Glen, a crazy game to finish a crazy season. What did you make of it yesterday?
It was quite mad, wasn't it? It was, as you said, very, very entertaining, which I didn't really know what to expect from the game. It could have been absolutely dreadful, and it did look like it was going to be horrific when we went 2-0 down in 10 minutes or whatever. I could see that, 4-0 down at half time and no one being there for the second half at that stage. I was surprised quite how many people were there, to be honest. It did look fairly full. I was expecting it to be very patchy with people sort of not bothering or whatever. So 2-0 down, and the key moment of the game was getting the first goal back, Ward-Prowse's goal, which of course kept the game close, kept us in it. There's a lovely bit of play by Alcaraz, which sort of illustrated why we really need to keep him if we possibly can for next season. 2-2 at half time, courtesy of we've seen some dreadful goalkeepers this season, mainly in our goal, but that guy, my word, I mean that was a hologram of all holograms there. He was just atrocious. It was Angus Gunn bad. Don't copy his dad in on the.
We almost got through the whole season.
Yeah. I mean, he was terrible. Zero presence. So I mean, the first goal went under him. At half time, it just seemed like everyone just gave up defending. It's interesting with Liverpool because obviously they played a lot of fringe players, and Liverpool fans are never shy of bigging up everything about their club, but their fringe players are really, really poor when you consider the level of the club and what they're trying to achieve in terms of winning trophies and stuff like that. So, I mean, Sulemana's run for the goal for his second goal is great because he takes it 70 yards or whatever. You watch Joe Gomez. I mean, when you watch it back, just watch Joe Gomez. He's just sprinting back towards his own goal, seemingly completely unaware that there's any danger at all. And by the time he turns around, the ball's in the net. It's just so bad. And then the game took a turn for the surreal, obviously, with Adam Armstrong scoring with his first kick. I mean, Henderson put him through with a pass which was as bad as almost as bad as Romeo Lavia's one, and for the first goal. And it was just weird. I mean, all the substitutions in the second half were kind of, let's have another standing ovation for a player who's not going to be playing for us anymore. It was a bit weird. So, on the one hand, you could say, Sellers managed it well, if you like, and he sort of gave everybody their moment. But you could argue that it's another illustration of him being just too nice.
Too friendly, yeah.
Yeah, too nice. I mean, I'm sure Prowse looked a bit embarrassed when he came off as well. I think he'd have preferred to stay on and play 95 minutes like he always does. But it was a strange day, and it could have been a lot worse. It was a very awkward day for everyone involved, bearing in mind half the team are leaving, and along with the manager. So I think overall, with it being entertaining, and some of the youngsters getting on the pitch and Tino getting on the pitch again, I thought it was probably as decent as it could be. And of course, we didn't get beat, which is a bit of a rarity. Happy days.
I must just say hello to Mansford07, who says, "Have you got a person on the pod for every win this season?" That's right. Yeah, it is. It was 6, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Steve, we score 4 at home and still can't win. That's another game that sums up the season, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so 4 times this season we've scored 3 or more goals, and we've not won any of those games. So that's that's a pointer to the future, isn't it? And as Glenn said, a stupidly entertaining game. Just mental, wasn't it? It was kind of a testimonial game at times for just comedy moments, players just doing things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. Adam Armstrong running 40 yards and scoring, sticking it in the corner for one. It was just one of those sort of end of season games that you do quite often get those with teams who've got nothing to play for. Liverpool couldn't change position up or down. We couldn't change position either. So yeah, for the players, there's literally no consequence to this game. So as a result, they put on a bit of a show, and it was good fun, really, wasn't it? I think if you're being hypercritical, you'd be annoyed at being 4-2 up and blowing that in the space of a minute. But I mean, I kind of quite like the fight that the players had with that fourth goal that Liverpool scored, because there was clearly a blatant handball by Gakpo out on the wing, and there was about 5 or 6 players all then crowded around the referee, like immediately after that goal goes in, screaming at him to bring it back or chat to his mate on VAR or whatever, and it's like, well, where's this kind of fight and getting in the referee's face been all season? Because that's been kind of one of the things we've pointed out over the season, is that we are too nice. Just similar to the manager. There's not been that sort of pit bull about us. The sort of not willing to take stuff lying down. We've been far too easy to kind of get in the faces of this season. And I mean, that's the attitude has got to be the one thing that changes with whoever. I mean, Russell Martin seems, I mean, it's still not been confirmed yet. So
at the time of recording,
there's still an element of doubt. But assuming it is him, that's one thing he's got to get into this squad, is that you've got to be kind of on the front foot, and you've got to kind of fight your corner, really, because we've done far too little of that this season.
Jacob, an entertaining end to life in the Premier League. Did you enjoy it yesterday? A bit surreal, really.
No, I loved it. It had everything, didn't it? It had Cody Gakpo finally scoring at St Mary's. It had Adam Armstrong scoring clinical. Lavia with passing. Bearing in mind, he's the only player that can actually probably receive the ball in that position, passing it straight to Jota against a team that wants him this summer. He had everything. I thought Lianco's scoop as well in that first half, when he was out on the left and decided to try and scoop Salah. I just thought everything about it was fantastic. And I even like the Ward-Prowse substitution as well. I thought it's so obviously a goodbye. But even afterwards, Sellers, he was in quite a punchy mood. He was in a good mood. I think he's spoken well the last 2 press conferences. And he said, goodbye, and I'll see you soon, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. So had everything, really enjoyed it. No one can really look into it because it counts for nothing next year, apart from if you want to play it from the back, you probably need to do a bit more practice in that, given the first goal.
First things to work on. Alfie, was that some of the character that's been missing for this much of the season? Because, you know, to come back from 2 goals down, you're just scratching your head going, where's this team been all year?
Yeah, I think you could say that, but ultimately the game was, as Jacob just touched on there, meaningless, and it was crazy, and it was Liverpool's dysfunctional back line that even Ruben Sellers pointed to after, when he said, he said that the only reason Calvin did well basically was because Liverpool didn't have their first team defenders in, which I thought was a slightly bizarre comment, but it was true. They didn't. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because we point to all these 1-0 losses for, playing 19th, I think 3 or 4, even 5 times this season, losing 1-0. But yeah, as Steve said, when they score 3 or 4 on 4 occasions, they can't win those games either. So I thought it summed up the season a little bit well. But yeah, it was an enjoyable game, and let's see what next season brings, I guess.
And Ben, it's great to have you with us as well tonight. What did you make of it all yesterday? I mean, a result that I don't think any of us saw coming. We'd have probably predicted that Liverpool would score 4, but I don't think any of us had Southampton down for scoring 4 in return.
Well, I think my prediction was 3-0, if I remember correctly, Martin, so I wasn't far off. But yeah, I think it was just bonkers. Like Jacob says, I mean, from that first goal that we give away, passing it across our area, right to, I think Lianco was captain at the end of the match. I mean, everything in between that was just bizarre, wasn't it? We had a team that's relegated. We got a youngster doing backflips when he scores a goal. It was just crazy. But I think it reiterates, and you guys have spoken about this on the pod a lot, our record against the top 6, and I appreciate that Liverpool made a lot of changes, but Saints have actually performed really, really well against the big 6 this season. It's probably just Spurs and Man City away where they got turned over, first game of the season. Glen will remember it, of course. Feels like a long time ago, but actually all the other games they've played against the big 6, they've actually performed. And I think the frustration for a lot of us is if they'd taken, even probably 75% of those performances into the games that, like Alfie just said there, around them, they probably wouldn't be in the position they're in. So yeah, a bit of a glimpse of, what could have been. And I've spoken to quite a few sort of friends and family today that really enjoyed yesterday. I think, they weren't expecting it. And I think probably have taken a bit of a smile into the summer that they maybe didn't expect to.
Yeah, that's nice. Bit of optimism. Glenn, we'll get on to some of the departures in a minute, but Sulemana finally scoring a couple of goals is pretty decent. That's the sort of performance you might expect, I guess, from a record signing.
It's kind of a win-win for everybody, isn't it? Because I think it's fairly well known that he's not been particularly happy since he's been here, and why would he be? He's hardly played. You know, he joined for 22 million quid and has hardly been given a game. That said, when he's been on the pitch, he hasn't done anything particularly. I think one assist was it up at Newcastle. So yeah, I was surprised to see him play sort of right out the middle, and to get 2 goals is great for him, because it, you know, I mean, already if you look at those look on the internet at all the Saints stories, there's all these articles being written of, oh, the new Sadio Mane for Liverpool to sign. So I mean, as far as Suleiman is concerned, that's great. If he wants a move, and he probably does, then you know it's worked out really well from him. You have to bear in mind the context of Liverpool having Gomez and Matip not bothering to defend, and the goalkeeper just doing nothing whatsoever. So yeah, great. But then Son Heung-min won goal of the season for an identical one to that one that Suleiman scored in the second half yesterday, where he just ran 70 yards in a straight line with no challenge. So you know, it was good from him. It was obviously his best performance for us. Nice to get 2 goals, but it has to have a little bit of context of as to how bad Liverpool's defending was. But I don't anticipate him still being here next season. I think he's still one of the players that, if they get an offer anywhere near what we paid for him, I think they'll let him go. Bearing in mind, you know, other players that we are going to struggle to get rid of. So anything could happen with him. Basically.
I did enjoy his post-match, his interview. I think that's probably the first one he's done where he said, well, if I stay, I stay. And if I go, I go. It's a new challenge. So refreshingly honest. What did you make of his performance yesterday, Steve? As Glenn said, we've got to kind of keep it all in context. And I know Ruben Sellers afterwards said that he needed time to learn the Premier League. So he was almost saying, don't blame me for not starting him sooner. Is it a case of we just signed him too late? Maybe had he joined back in the summer, things could have been a bit different?
I mean, yeah, possibly. But then had we signed many players back in the summer, an actual goal scorer for a start, then things would have been completely different. And I think sort of this idea that you necessarily need to learn the Premier League, I don't think you do. I think you need to learn the players around you. I don't think the opposition really makes that much. That much of a difference in terms of the systems and things like that, because by and large, teams in the top European leagues, the vast majority of them play similar systems or slight variations of, and I think it's the interaction between individual teammates that is the key. And of course, let's not forget, he came in as a winger. Under a manager who doesn't play with wingers, so he's always going to be struggling from the word go, really. And I mean, even Sellers' formation doesn't really utilize wingers to the same extent as a lot of the sort of top managers do. But when we have gone 4-3-3, that's the sort of role where I think he could fit in quite well, and I think he was probably a little bit underused. But no, I mean he was good yesterday, and yeah, I mean I would like to think that we can keep hold of him, but yeah, as Glenn says, if he's one of the few players that is attracting genuine interest, and we can get basically all the money back,
it would need to be what, 25 million quid plus, I guess, as an offer.
Yeah, I would think so. And if we get that money back, along with what we're almost certainly the sort of big cash we're likely to get for Lavia and Ward-Prowse, then that's a big chunk of money that covers the shortfall that we're gonna see in terms of revenue. Once we then look at, have an assessment of what else is around, Nathan Teller's theoretically going to be back. I mean, potentially Jack Stevens is back. I mean, who knows what the intentions of Bournemouth and Burnley are in regards to those two players. So that's another potential windfall if either of those clubs decide, right, no, these are the guys we want. and we're actually going to dust off the checkbook and hand over the money that Saints want. I'm not sure it's going to pan out that way. I imagine for those two, I think they'll end up looking elsewhere. I think Taylor will be too expensive for Burnley. I think with Bournemouth, I think they can probably find better. But we'll see.
I want to talk a bit about James Ward-Prowse as well. Ben, standing ovation yesterday when he was subbed off on 87 minutes. As we mentioned earlier, I think Jacob said he probably would have been annoyed that he wanted to play for the final 5 minutes or so. But that was pretty emotional yesterday. And I think it's fair to say that's someone that deserves to be playing in the Premier League next year.
Yeah, I think it's catch-22, isn't it? Because as Saints fans, we obviously want to see him, I think, in the team. You know, we're aware that the squad needs a rebuild, but potentially you don't want to lose your captain at any stage, really. But I think, yeah, you know, he's a player that he's played for England. Saints have undoubtedly helped him on that journey. But, you know, someone that's been at the club longer than Matt Letizia has, I think he's been there, 20 years now, hasn't he? So, you know, someone that I think I wouldn't say he's necessarily underrated, but I think he's one of those players that potentially you know you'll kind of miss him when he's gone more than you kind of miss him when he's here, if that makes sense. And I think, you know, you look at the stats. I mean, he's probably not had his best season, but I think off the record, and Alfie and Jacob will know better than me, I think he's top goal scorer in the Premier League. He's top assists for Saints. You know, most passes, most tackles, most interceptions. I'd imagine he's in the top 3 for distance covered in the Premier League, if not number 1, you know, because he's normally out there. So I think, you know, I think he said yesterday he could have gone, you know, he feels like he's delivered this season and is going out with his head held high. And I think it's hard to argue with that. But I do think as captain, again, I heard him say during this week that there's only so much he can do and standards have slipped and things like that as well. So I think there's elements of his captaincy that I think probably people would say he's not the strongest leader out there. But I think in terms of what he's done for the club and, you know, whether he does get to stay or go, I think it was nice that he got that opportunity yesterday and for St Mary's to kind of say goodbye to him.
It was an emotional moment, wasn't it, Jacob? Everybody on their feet and everyone videoing it too as he left. That was there was a lot of those videos doing the rounds yesterday. But I don't think anyone would begrudge him his move. I know we've spoken about this before, but he would leave with everybody's best interests.
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously you had Theo Walcott first, who he got a standing ovation. Everyone sat down. Ella Yunusi then goes off, another standing ovation, or well, half and half, and then James Ward-Prowse, obviously the biggest standing ovation for him. I think what James Ward-Prowse has done, a lot of it is intangible as well. People don't see it in terms of him being the conduit between the dressing room and the ownership in some respects, but also the coaching staff as well. The role model he is, the attitude he is in terms of welcoming the youngsters in when they train with the first team. What he does, he's the glue in a dressing room that's been pretty fragmented this season, and he's always the guy that everyone looks to, and he can only do so much. So he might not be the loudest, he might be the only one that speaks in a huddle after they concede a goal, but what he does do is that he's one that everyone looks to when there's a crisis, and unfortunately there's been too many crises this season for Ward-Prowse to keep bailing Southampton out of it. I think what he's done, especially in the last couple of years, but especially this year, he might not have had his best year like Ben says, but I think I've appreciated him a lot more this year because the burden on him is incredible, and he's 28 now. He's in the prime. He has to get a move away, and for a guy that's done so much for Southampton over 2 decades, given everything, you know, you can't accuse him of leaving anything left in the tank. I think having a move away to stay in the Premier League and to keep his England aspirations alive is what he deserves.
Is that going to be key, do you think, Alfie? Just the England aspirations, and this is a chance for him to prove himself at potentially a bigger club and maybe win something, dare I say, or at least get back in that England squad?
I think possibly. He's got a very hard task once to get back in the England squad, hasn't he, really? I think we're being totally honest. Gareth Southgate seems to like Conor Gallagher, and obviously we've got Bellingham, Rice and that as well. But I think Adam Blackmore made a good point this week on the radio. I think he spoke to James Ward-Prowse during the week, and he asked him what was his favourite seasons at Southampton, and he said about the European seasons, and he said, which one? He said, either. You know, I think James Ward-Prowse was always making it relatively clear that European football is his aim, and he wants to experience that. He loved it playing for Southampton, and hopefully he gets that again. Obviously, I'd like to plant the seed in his head that if he was to stay and get Saints promoted, he would be an even bigger legend than he already is. That would be fantastic. But On the leadership thing as well, I think we only have the testimony of others, and I think Theo Walcott came out and spoke to us, and he was very clear that right, you might not hear Prowse all the time if you're sat in the Northern or whatever, but he is the leader in that group, and he said this. And on a professional level as well, with Ward-Prowse, he's somebody who often gets wheeled out by the club when they've been hammered or when they've lost a big game, and it's probably not at the time he wants to talk, but he's always professional. He's always happy to chat, and he's always pretty honest. I think the only question he's ever been not honest with me, in my opinion, is asking about his future. I think it's because he probably can't reveal anymore, so you have to give him that. But yeah, I'll miss him for sure.